Here we are, back at it again with the X-Men 97 impromptu discussions, stream of consciousness reviews, whatever these are. We're gonna be taking a look at episode 6, Life Death Part 2. As always with these, spoilers, because we're gonna get into all kinds of potential details and just details in general. That's how we do these.
No, just perish.
I was so eager to get started, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Sasha. This is Casually Comics. Okay, moving on. Life Death Part 2 is following up on two threads. Obviously, Life Death Part 1, which started at the end of episode 4, and Remember It, episode 5, which featured the massacre on Genosha.
Save as many as you can. We shall not live our days wondering if we could have saved more.
This episode is a bit of a breather, but not quite in the same way as episode 4 was after episode 3. This one still has a lot going on, a lot of deep character beats and moments.
Do as you did on Earth. Play the role of the peacemaker.
Wasn't aware my X-Men and I were playing make-believe.
And it's a bit more serious in some of the things it's delving into than Jubilee's episode was back in episode 4 when she was sucked into the Mojoverse video game. But it also serves as a step back because the things that are happening in the parts of this episode are happening far removed from what we just saw in episode 5. So that makes it feel a bit like there's a tiny bit of a break, a breather. So this episode is broken up into two main plot lines. One involves Professor Xavier, Lilandra, and the Shia'ar Empire.
A union with the Terran would bind the Shia'ar into alliance with his inferior homeworld.
The other involves the follow-up of Forge, Storm, and the Adversary, and Storm getting her powers back. Yes, they're back.
So let them thunder, for I am lightning!
For me, I view that as it's fast. For others, they feel like it took too long. Some people even dipped out because they felt it was taking too long. Also, with her getting them back, she got her first ever costume from back when she first debuted in the 1970s in Giant Size X-Men #1. It is nice to see that costume. It's iconic. And they went back to that thing where somehow she's able to transform into a costume at the same time as summoning her powers. It's never made much sense, but I like it. She's summoning the the air. Electricity and magnets, how do they work? Say goodbye to the mohawk hairstyle. I hope you weren't too attached to it because we're back to the long, luscious locks. So in terms of these two parts, what are we looking at? Well, for Professor X and Lilandra, we're looking at bringing in, for the first time, a lot of the cosmic elements. We're going to talk about the Kree, we're going to talk about the Shia'ar, we're going to talk about their war. We're going to see Ronan the Accuser, we're going to see Deathbird. She's going to put her heel through Ronan's face.
My dearest sister is always of utmost priority.
Also, hey, look, Vulcan. That's going to be another thing for Cyclops to deal with. This part was also a surprise for some if they're not up on either the comics or the past 92 series, because at the end of that series, for those who recall, my hair's getting stuck in my lipstick again. I'm too excited. Charles didn't die.
You are too late, Lilandra.
For human science, yes.
Then he will survive?
Yes, but only under Shia'ar care.
But the first episode this series didn't have a previously on, so some who are just jumping on or perhaps hadn't watched in a while may have forgotten that that was the case or may not have known, so some were genuinely surprised to see Charles. For others, we were waiting, and it was nice to see him again. He's been enjoying his time in space, potentially becoming the emperor of the Shia'ar Empire, and they do delve into some of the problems that could raise.
Xavier would see his Milky Way ghetto become our new throne world.
Both in terms of the Empire, its politics, its boundaries, and also trying to tie it back thematically to whether or not he would be abandoning the X-Men, whether they still need him or not. He's being othered here in a different way that's meant to mirror the othering for being a mutant, even though they're pretty impressed by his mutant abilities, as they should be. They're impressive. Instead, what he's having to mask from them is the fact that he can't walk.
Much like my legs in this armor's exoskeleton.
All ruling is make-believe.
So it's interesting that they're playing with different things being seen as strengths and weaknesses in different places. That's some nuance, which this episode requires because some elements of it are more nuanced than others, which brings us over to Storm and Forge. Life Death Part 2. Last time we left off with Life Death, Storm had learned that it was Forge who had been partially responsible for the weapon that had been able to be diluted or distilled by the Executioner that shot her and took her powers. This was a modification on the Life Death story where she was shot by Gyrick, but again, that gun did come from technology that was created by Forge. So this had messed up their romance, which had been moving at breakneck speed, and she had run off and run into the Adversary, who has been greatly modified, not really matching some of the forms that people may be more familiar with. The adversary was messing with Storm's mind and had bitten Forge, and there was demonic energy, ooze, badness going up his body. So that's where we were with that. When we pull back in, we're still in this realm in between what's happening and what's not happening. It has some Shadow King vibes, but it's happening with the adversary. So at times it's difficult to tell what's really happening, what's a hallucination or happening inside the mindscape, which is cool at points and disorienting at others. It also leads to a bit of a disjointed feeling for some of her sections.
Is that why you fear your power, sought refuge with this monotone family?
And for me, and this is a for me thing, mileage will vary, her sections weren't as solidly written as the rest of the episode or other episodes prior. These sections made me hone in on the fact that this episode is the first so far that has not been written by Beau DeMayo or with Beau DeMayo, who, for some of you who've been keeping up with the extra metatextual context of the show, was the showrunner, writer, executive producer who was fired for reasons, mystery reasons, before the show dropped, maybe about a week before, and it's still a mystery. He is now back on social media talking about some things, inspirations for the episodes, what some of them mean, what he was trying to do, answering fan questions, which shows that there's been some kind of discussion, because before he wasn't allowed to do any promotion. I would say answering questions counts as promotion. Maybe that's just me, maybe in legalese you can skirt that, but the point is there was some kerfuffle around that. And so there are some questions people discuss the show, especially people who are liking it, of what does it mean when they run out of stuff he's written? And for me, this episode really drove that home, because a lot of this series has been pulling in lots of themes, motifs, some pulling from real world imagery or events, or trying to make very not subtle commentary. And it hasn't been subtle at all, but it's been well implemented. I felt like that didn't really apply for some of the Stormforge parts, some of their dialogue. It felt a bit clunky and like it was trying to be clever, but in the process came across as very obvious, on the nose, even though other things have been on the nose, but not in an on the nose way that blended in the way that some of the other moments have prior in the series.
Growing up, I always heard how the worst weapon used by the Europeans was not bullets or blankets, but a white lie that they could make us.
Now, that just may be a me thing. This is still miles better than a lot of some content that is attempting to deliver a message time of recording. Maybe I'm just spoiled by episode 5, which was a masterclass in how to do that. However, all of that aside, it also felt like some of the dialogue with Storm didn't match up with some of the depictions from earlier episodes. I went back after some of the things they said about how she felt about daydreaming about being human.
It is a tempting daydream. But then I remember how my mutant gifts brought me to this mansion, to this family. I confessed this as if to console her. No matter how many I saved, my mutant gifts inspired twice as much hate in humanity.
Again, for me, this didn't feel like it matched. It felt like this episode was twisting that, to me at least, to make it match the point it was trying to make, that she has swallowed a lie that she's better without her powers. But to me, watching all these episodes, it never felt like she'd felt that. It felt like a narrative of internalized self-hatred was being made to apply to her, which, while realistic, didn't quite fit with what had happened before. At least in my estimation, but others could argue that it does fit. So again, for me, because we're talking about my reaction to the episode, it took some of the power away from her getting her powers back. It just didn't feel as powerful as it was meant to. Even though the animation was brilliant, it looked great, it was exciting, you felt her happiness, her joy, and just to see her return to being Storm, that part lovely. But the build up towards it and some of the dialogue and getting into her headspace, I didn't feel landed as well as it could. But that's just me. What did you think? Did you love it? Do you feel that it was great? Did you love all the things it was saying? Do you not know what I'm talking about? What are you talking about? I feel a bit awkward discussing some of these things sometimes, because when it comes to the X-Men in particular, people get very passionate in both directions about it being very good or being very bad. And so sometimes if you're in a position of pointing out elements you liked and disliked, it can end up making people have very, very strong reactions that pull away from what you're actually saying, which can be, in my opinion, the worst thing about discussing X-Men in any era. But I wanted to say what I thought, because these are just my impressions. And again, maybe they'll change over time, maybe they'll solidify, we'll see. The X-Men make me feel very contemplative, what can I say? This episode has also started to pull in some of the other elements of the Marvel Universe, or specifically the MCU. You're starting to see how some of those things are being played with. For example, when Forge used his magic, it was very Doctor Strangey in how it looked. Again, it's just got me thinking, because so many of these changes have been deliberate, because they have been pulling and reattributing from different series, which has been very well done at points. For example, over in Charles's plot, where his lecture saves itself from falling on its face by becoming an actual lecture, which was clever, and it's also a way to repurpose some of the scenes from E is for Extinction, which is where they were pulling from an episode 5 for the Genosha attack in the first place, but now they've pulled even more imagery from it. Of course, after I made a video on E is for Extinction, check out that video if you missed it, we went through that arc, but in this episode, they pull from the scene where the destruction is happening. Instead, it's happening in Charles's mindscape in the classroom, instead of it actually happening on Genosha physically with Emma. And some of the lines he says as he's feeling psychically the massacre, they are taken from lines he says when he's viewing it in Cerebro in E is for Extinction.
No! They were dancing, drinking wine, making love!
So that was a nice touch. It also lends credence to some of the theories that Magneto is, I wouldn't say fine, but alive, because the X-Man that he sees when he's feeling this is Gambit. And given the fact that he's so close to Magneto, even talking about him in this episode to Gladiator, yeah, Gladiator's there, aka Purple Superman.
You know, I have a very old and very dear friend on Earth who would agree with you. His name is Magnus.
So we'll have to see where it goes with that, and if people's theories about Gambit becoming New Sun or becoming a Horseman of Apocalypse, where we're gonna go. I know some people hope that Gambit stays dead or that he doesn't. Some people feel that the sword will lose weight if people are brought back too quickly. What do you think? I want to hear what you think. Also, just the imagery of the skeletons in the classroom is very evocative and chilling. It's well done. Now, this episode also teased the reveal of who exactly was behind these attacks. And again, this pulls from E is for Extinction. In E is for Extinction, Cassandra Nova, who is the orchestrator of the Wild Sentinel attack, had pulled Bolivar Trask's nephew so he can control the Master Mold because his DNA would allow him to activate it. Here we see that it's Trask who's given the DNA to activate the Master Mold, but to Sinister. So some people had theories that it was Cassandra Nova or Bastion or both. Sinister still could be working with other people. We'll see where it goes. Are you excited by this reveal? Do you wish that it was other people? I don't know. Sinister being here means we can still keep playing with Cable. We could have done that anyway. We'll see how it plays out overall for the entire series by the end. On the whole, this episode was well structured and well paced in terms of the intercutting between the two different plots with Charles and Storm. You got to see a decent amount of growth for both. It also was a good interlude in that it moved the plot forward, and at the same time you got to see what people were doing while the massacre was occurring. So it still felt like everything was going forward, not that you were just taking a breakout, like a beach episode or something like that, which is no shade. Beach episodes can be great. The action sequences were lovely in terms of some of the imagery utilized. It was very evocative. This was a very romantic episode, but not romances that are going the best in certain regards.
It doesn't matter. While I cowered in the cosmos, the unthinkable has happened.
Charles, if you leave, you will prove my sister right about your kind.
How do you feel about Storm just being okay with Forge? I think it works. It matches the whole theme of forgiveness that was going on in both her part and also Charles's part about it being necessary. On the whole, a very solid episode. It was very exciting to see all of the space and cosmic elements coming in because there's so many stories they can mine from there and play with at this point. It was nice to see Storm return with her powers back. She's back to being a powerhouse. I said the word powers so many times this video, so she's gonna show up with the X-Men. We're gonna see how that goes. And we've had this little bit of a break, so now we can hop back into what's been going on directly after. And there were some good little kernels as to how the rest of the world is responding in this episode.
Nations refusing to allow mutants displaced by the brutal attack on Genosha to return to their home countries.
Personally, I think I enjoyed the imagery the most in this episode, probably because it was space and cosmic, which is just something I enjoy in general. Anyway, those are just my thoughts. They're again very jumbled, I know. This is just discussion. Let me know what you're thinking. How did you feel about it? Did you like it? Did you feel there was a difference in the dialogue, or do you think I'm mad? Did you enjoy seeing how Storm got her powers back? Did you like seeing Charles in space? What are you thinking? Like it, don't like it, still enjoying it, off of the run? Put it all down below. And while you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time spent discussing comics with me and comic adjacent things. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.